I was sitting at my computer staring at an opportunity that could change the trajectory of my life. The application was open, my name was already typed at the top, and the submit button was right there. But I just couldn't bring myself to hit submit because I was so scared. I felt my chest starting to get tight and my hands started to sweat. And a familiar wave of anxiety started to move through my body. All because I had a chance to pitch my business for non-dilutive funding to support my vision. The opportunity was right there in front of my face, but I just didn't have the courage to put my name in the hat. I learned the hard way that you can be completely aware of what your future requires and still be unable to move forward. I was aware of the exposure that I needed and aware of the visibility that it would bring, but I was also aware of something else. That hitting that submit button would put me in a very unique position. A position of being judged, a position of being talked about, a position of wondering, will people think that my business is worthy enough? Will they think that I am worthy enough? Part of what I was experiencing was something that many of us know all too well: imposter syndrome, which is that quiet voice that tells you that eventually somebody is going to find out that you are not as capable as they think. So I sat there, aware of everything, aware of the opportunity, aware of my fears, aware of the consequences of not taking action, and still I didn't move. And that moment raised the question that I think many of us experience in our own lives. How is it possible to clearly see the changes that we need to make and still not make them? How can we understand our patterns, our fears, and our habits, and yet our actions stay exactly the same? Because if awareness alone created change, many of us would already be living very different lives. Today, we live in a culture that talks a lot about self-awareness. We journal, we reflect, we analyze ourselves through and through. Most people can explain their behaviors with incredible clarity. They can tell you exactly why they're procrastinating, why they are people pleasing, and why fear is quietly making the decisions in their lives for them. And yet the behavior doesn't change. And for a long time, do you know what I thought the answer was? I thought the answer was simply more awareness. I thought that if I just understood myself a little bit more, if I was a little more honest about my shortcomings, that insight will move me forward. But what I didn't realize was that that insight wasn't enough to move me forward. I didn't see at the time that I was experiencing something that I now call the awareness stall. The awareness stall is when you can clearly see what you need to do and still not do it. It is that strange space where awareness is present, the path forward is visible, and yet something keeps you stuck exactly where you are. And once I started noticing this, I realized that this wasn't just happening to me. I saw it in founders with brilliant ideas who kept waiting to launch. I saw it in talented professionals who understood their potential but kept playing small. I saw it in people who knew exactly the changes that they needed to make in their lives to become the best versions of themselves, and instead they stayed stuck for years. These weren't people who lacked insight. In fact, many of them were deeply self-aware. But what I realized is awareness can explain behavior, but awareness alone doesn't move you. Something else is required: self-leadership. And it turns out that this tension between knowing and doing shows up everywhere. Behavior scientists actually have a name for it, and they call it the intention behavior gap. One famous experiment illustrates this perfectly. In a study conducted by Walter Mischel at Stanford University, children were brought into a room and given one simple choice. They could either eat one marshmallow immediately, or they could wait a little while and receive two. And who wouldn't want two yummy, gooey marshmallows over just one? Well, the children understood the rule. They knew that waiting would lead to the better reward, and yet many of them still ate the first marshmallow because resisting immediate comfort was difficult. And what's fascinating is that this dynamic doesn't disappear when we grow up. As adults, we know the long-term benefits of our choices. We know the actions that lead our lives forward. And yet, again and again, we choose what is familiar, safe, and comfortable in the moment. Self-awareness allows us to observe our thoughts, our fears, and our patterns. It helps us to understand why we behave the way we do. But self-leadership asks a different question. Instead of asking, why do I feel this way? Self-leadership asks, what do I need to do right now to move myself forward in spite of how I feel? Self-awareness helps us to understand our patterns. Self-leadership helps us to move forward anyway. It is the ability to guide your behavior in the direction of the life that you want to live, even when your feelings are pulling you somewhere else. In other words, self-awareness observes the pattern. Self-leadership interrupts it. And over time, I noticed that things like this tend to follow a pattern. And that's when I discovered that leading yourself forward follows a process that I call climb. Because when you're stuck in the awareness stall, it can feel like you've fallen into a pit. You can clearly see your future above you, but the only way out is to climb. C, confront the story. You have to confront the story that your mind is telling you, because that's exactly what it is. It's a story. For me, it sounded like, you're not ready. You don't have enough experience. You're not worthy of that room. But when you bring the story to the light and you actually say it out loud, something starts to shift. It loses its power because now you can look at it and say, I see you, but you're not in charge. L, lean into the truth. Once you confront the story, you start to realize Most of it isn't truth, it's fear. And fear has a very specific job. It's trying to keep you safe. But if you're not careful, the same mechanism that protects you can also limit you. So you answer the story with proof. I've done hard things before. I've figured things out before. I've grown through challenges before. You remind yourself of who you've already been. Then comes the turning point. I intentionally decide. You intentionally decide not based on how you feel, but based on what matters. You decide that your future matters more than your fear. And that decision, that's self-leadership. M, move anyway. And you're not moving because fear disappeared. Many times, fear will always be a factor, but you're moving because it is the only way forward. B, build identity. And every time you do that, something deeper begins to change. You start building evidence that you can move in spite of your fear, evidence that you can grow beyond the moments that once stopped you. And over time, evidence becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who stalls and start seeing yourself as someone who moves forward anyway. When I first started practicing self-leadership, something began to change. And not all at one time, but in all the small decisions. I started submitting applications that I had once avoided. I started putting myself in rooms that once intimidated me. I started taking action before I fully felt ready. And over time, those small decisions compounded. Opportunities that once felt out of reach started to become accessible. And eventually, those small decisions led me to receiving more than $235,000 in non-dilutive funding to support the vision that I had once been too afraid to submit. Thank you. Thank you. All because I stopped waiting to feel ready and started leading myself forward. Many of the biggest opportunities in all of our lives often sit on the other side of a single decision, the decision to lead ourselves forward. Awareness might show you the pit. It might help you understand how you got there, but awareness alone will never get you out. Getting out requires something different. It requires a climb. And every climb starts the same way. You confront the story. You lean into the truth. You intentionally decide. You move anyway. And step by step, you start to build something far more powerful than confidence. You build the identity of someone who doesn't just understand their fears, but someone who leads themselves through them. We spend so much time trying to understand ourselves, but the real question isn't whether we understand ourselves. The question is, are we willing to lead ourselves? Keep the faith. Thank you.